Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story.
Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
You ever sit at a family dinner and realize you're just background noise? Like you're the damn wallpaper while everyone else plays favorites? Yeah, that was me. Until the house, the cars, and that one Christmas that changed everything. But before all of that, before the leather seats and the gated driveway, there was a boy sitting on a folding chair at the edge of the room, watching everyone else laugh like they belonged to something. And me? I was just the quiet cousin with hand-me-down sneakers, the one who got the crust piece of pie, if any at all. My name's Mike Carson. I'm 56 years old. I own 3 businesses, 2 homes, and one heart that's still carrying the bruises from being treated like I was less than family. I'm not telling you this for pity. Hell, I don't want it. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that some things don't come from bitterness. They come from years of swallowing things you never should have had to. And eventually, when your gut's full of that kind of thing, you either explode or you do something different. I chose different. I didn't grow up poor, but we weren't fancy either. My parents were the don't ask, don't expect type. You got food, you got a roof, you kept quiet. That was the deal. But then there was the rest of the family. Aunt Janice with her picture-perfect Christmas cards. Uncle Rick who handed out $50 bills like candy at Thanksgiving. And Tammy, my cousin, always the loudest, always the one telling people what real success looked like, even when she had credit card debt and a car on bricks. They all had their little hierarchy, like some invisible scoreboard everyone else could read but me. And you know what? I wasn't even mad about it as a kid. I just thought that's how families were. You had the stars, and you had the background extras. I was background. The kid who got invited late. The one who didn't get a +1 when everyone else brought their girlfriends or boyfriends. I remember once at Christmas, I must have been about 9. I got a sweater 2 sizes too small with someone else's name still on the tag. Meanwhile, Tammy's kid unwrapped a damn Game Boy. That's when it started sinking in. This wasn't just accidental forgetfulness. This was a pattern. Every Thanksgiving, I brought a side dish no one touched. Every Easter, I showed up early and still got told to sit at the kids' table. I was the guy they forgot in the family group texts, the one who found out about baby showers and barbecues from Facebook posts 2 days later. I kept thinking, maybe next year. Maybe if I got better grades, or made the team, or showed up with a new car, they'd finally look at me like I mattered. But I could have walked in with a gold medal and a marching band behind me, and I still would have been just Mike. The one who didn't quite fit. You want to know the first time I realized none of them actually knew me? My dad had a heart attack when I was 22. I drove him to the hospital. I held his hand when he coded. I made the arrangements. And at the funeral, I heard Tammy say to someone, I didn't even know Mike was still around. That one hit me like a shovel to the ribs. Still around? I was the one keeping the damn pieces together while the rest of them showed up in matching black outfits like they gave a damn. But I stayed quiet. I always did. I smiled through gritted teeth. I sent cards. I remembered birthdays. I gave thoughtful gifts, never flashy ones. You know why? Because I still had the stupid, naive hope that if I kept showing up, they'd eventually see me. Not just the guy who made it out, but the one who never stopped trying to be part of something that never wanted him in the first place. Years passed. I got a job. Then a better one. Then I started my own thing. Construction. Then logistics. Then, don't ask me how tech. It blew up. By 45, I was a millionaire, not on paper, but in the bank. But here's the kicker, I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. I still showed up to those family gatherings in beat-up jeans and a Ford F-150 that coughed when it started. I wanted to see if anything changed when I didn't wave my wallet around. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Not even a little. In fact, the richer I got, the more invisible I became. Like success made me threatening, or worse, arrogant. Except I wasn't showing off. I was still bringing store-bought pies to Christmas and sitting near the door. But it didn't matter. To them, I was either a charity case or a show-off. Nothing in between. I remember one Thanksgiving, I'd just closed a deal that made me more in 1 month than my dad had made in 10 years. I sat on the porch with my coffee, looking at my hands, thinking, what the hell am I still doing here? But I still stayed. I still smiled. I still brought the green bean casserole no one touched. Because some part of me, buried deep down, still wanted their approval. Or maybe just their damn respect. I tell you all this because I need you to understand. When someone finally snaps, it's almost never about that one thing. It's about the 10,000 little cuts that came before. And me? I didn't snap with a scream. I snapped with silence and something way colder than yelling. But that part's coming later. For now, just know this. I was never the golden child. I was the shadow, the filler, the afterthought. And like all shadows, I learned to move quietly. But one day, I decided to step into the light and make sure every damn one of them saw me for who I really was. And once they did, they couldn't unsee it. It had been almost 5 years since I'd shown up to a family gathering, and honestly, I only went because Aunt Janice guilt-tripped me over the phone for 15 straight minutes. Said I was being distant. Said the kids missed me. Said things like, we don't care about your fancy house, Mike, just come eat some ribs with the family. I knew better than to believe it, but something about the way she said family still got under my skin. It always did. So I showed up, just like they wanted, jeans and flannel shirt, no watch, no flashy car. I parked my truck a block away so no one could size me up from the driveway. Didn't bring a bottle of wine, just a Tupperware dish of my famous smoked mac and cheese, even though I knew damn well it'd sit untouched behind Aunt Janice's store-bought potato salad and Tammy's burn-ass cornbread. But that's fine. I wasn't there for recognition. I just wanted to see for myself whether time had done anything to these people, whether distance had softened their sharp little family circles enough to maybe let someone like me inside. It was the usual chaos. Kids running barefoot through sprinkler-soaked grass, someone's Bluetooth speaker blasting bad country music, folding chairs scattered like landmines across the backyard. I kept my hands in my pockets most of the time, nodding at people who gave me the obligatory, hey stranger, but didn't bother to ask what I'd been up to. They never did. I stood near the grill, made small talk with Uncle Rick about his cholesterol medication, smiled through his same tired joke about how I was still single, like it was some kind of moral failing. I even let Tammy's youngest smear ketchup on my jeans without saying a word, because God forbid I be the guy who can't handle kids being kids. For about 2 hours, I floated through that party like a ghost in denim. I'd been there, I'd shown up, and I was already planning my exit when I realized I'd left my lighter in the truck. I walked around the side of the house, behind the garden beds where no one could see me, just trying to steal a quiet moment to myself, maybe grab a smoke and clear the static from my head. But I stopped dead when I heard voices through the open kitchen window, Tammy's voice, sharp as glass and full of that sugary poison she thinks passes for charm. He only shows up when he wants to feel like a big shot, she said, and someone, I think it was Janice, gave a dry laugh. Buys gifts like he's Santa F****** ing Claus or something. It's pity money. Always has been. Makes him feel better than us, I guess. I stood there frozen, my hand clenched around a pack of cigarettes, heart thudding like a hammer in a hollow drum. I didn't say anything. I didn't march in there and throw a fit. I didn't even finish the cigarette. I just stood there, listening to them talk about me like I wasn't flesh and blood, like I was some distant character on a reality show they all hated but kept watching. The worst part? They didn't even sound mad. They sounded entertained. Like dissecting me was just something they did when the beer ran low and the conversation dried up. Ever been generous with someone only to find out they thought you were just showing off? Would you walk away, or would you remind them who the hell you are? Tell me in the comments. What would you do if you heard your own family talking behind your back like that? That comment, it cracked something inside me that had been patched over too many times. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. I never threw gifts in their faces. I gave those things, those birthday presents, those holiday cards, those little boxes with handwritten notes, because part of me still wanted connection. Still wanted a sliver of something real between us. But now I knew how they saw it. Not kindness. Not generosity. Pity money. A performance. I sat in my truck for almost 20 minutes before I drove off. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't grab my dish. Didn't look back at the house with its string lights and lawn chairs and cooler full of melting ice. I just sat there and let the weight of it all settle in. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sad. I felt clear. Like everything that had been muddy and confusing since childhood had suddenly snapped into place. They were never going to see me the way I wanted them to. They had already made up their minds about who I was. It wasn't just about Tammy's words, it was about every time I'd been laughed off, passed over, talked down to. That one comment was just the final straw in a lifetime of being misunderstood and silently judged by people who thought they knew me better than I knew myself. As I pulled away from the curb, I made a quiet little promise to myself. Not the kind you say out loud, not even the kind you write down. The kind that simmers under your skin and waits for just the right moment to rise up and make itself real. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to fight or explain. No, I was going to do something much more satisfying. Something they wouldn't see coming. Something they'd never be able to forget. They thought I gave gifts to feel bigger than them? Fine. I'd give them something they couldn't ignore. And this time, I'd make damn sure they knew exactly what it meant. You ever try to fix a broken memory by replaying it so many times in your head that the edges were smooth and soft, like sea glass that's been tumbling in the waves for years? That's how it feels when I think about Debbie. My sister wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, and she didn't make speeches or storm out of rooms, but she saw me, really saw me, when nobody else in our family seemed to care if I showed up or not. We were just a year apart, Irish twins they called us, born 11 months apart and raised more like a package deal than two separate people. And even though she didn't live long enough to see who I became, I still hear her voice sometimes, tucked in the quiet parts of my mind where nothing else dares to speak. Debbie was the only one who ever stood between me and the rest of them. When I got left out of birthday sleepovers or handed the crusty edge of the pie, she'd lean in and whisper something ridiculous to make me laugh, like only the strongest men can survive cherry crust. You're a damn warrior. And even though she was just a kid herself, she always knew when the silence around me wasn't fair. She was the first to notice when the family would forget to make me a plate or leave my name off the Christmas draw. I remember one year, I must have been around 10, when Aunt Janice accidentally left me off the list for the cousins' gift exchange. Debbie gave me her own present instead, a little hand-sewn pouch filled with quarters and jawbreakers, and told me not to tell anyone. I didn't. Not for 30 years. Not until now. She died when I was 23. It was a car accident on the way home from her overnight shift at a diner. Some drunk kid ran a red light and clipped the back of her car, sent her spinning into a utility pole. Just like that, the one person who gave a damn about me gone in a blink. The family cried. They wore black. They said all the right things at the funeral, but not one of them knew what she'd meant to me. Not really. After that, I felt like a raft that had snapped loose from the dock. I drifted. I floated. I existed without direction. I went to work, kept my head down, didn't talk much. Nobody in the family reached out. Maybe they assumed I'd be fine. Maybe they didn't care enough to wonder. It took years for me to build anything worth calling a life. I started with nothing, no inheritance, no connections, just long days, burned fingers, and a back that ached like an old man's by the time I was 30. I worked jobs where I hauled lumber in the snow, got screamed at by foremen who couldn't spell my name, and did the kind of labor that carves itself into your hands like rings on a tree. I didn't complain. I just kept going. And when I finally started my own company, it was small at first, just me and 2 other guys who knew how to show up on time and not screw around. But I was smart with money, and I never forgot the feeling of being overlooked, so I paid attention to numbers, to people, to opportunity. Eventually, the calls started coming in faster than I could keep up with. And once I had some stability, once I could afford more than one pair of boots, I started doing something I probably shouldn't have done. I started sending gifts. Not big ones, nothing flashy, just small, thoughtful things for birthdays and holidays. A leather-bound notebook for Janice when I heard she was journaling. A drone kit for Tammy's oldest when he got into tech stuff. Books, subscriptions, nice bottles of whiskey. I wasn't trying to flex. I was trying to earn a place I thought maybe I could buy with kindness. I see that now, and it makes me feel both embarrassed and furious. Because they never saw it for what it was. They didn't see effort. They saw guilt. They saw vanity. They saw pity money, like Tammy said. A few nights after that backyard comment, I was cleaning out my guest room, turning it into a kind of study/library space, and I pulled out an old copy of Mice and Men, Debbie's favorite book. Inside the cover, something slipped out and landed on the carpet. It was a folded piece of yellowed notebook paper with her handwriting in blue ink, smudged at the corner like she'd spilled water or maybe cried while writing it. Just a few lines. Nothing dramatic. Just her voice, plain and true, saying exactly what I needed to hear again after all these years. You don't need them to clap for you. You'll be someone without their applause. I swear you will. I sat on the floor with that letter in my hand for I don't know how long. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 5 hours. My chest hurt like someone had squeezed all the air out of it, and I realized, in that moment, that I'd been carrying this wound my whole damn life, not just missing her, but missing the one person who believed I didn't have to earn my place. I already had it in her eyes. And maybe that should have been enough. But it wasn't. Because I was still angry. Angry at every time I'd held back from saying what I really thought. Angry that I'd let people like Tammy define how I saw myself. Angry that I'd spent money, time, and years trying to be included by people who never once thought to include me without being prompted. That little note from Debbie didn't fix everything, but it gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: permission. Permission to stop begging for what I'd never get. Permission to stop writing checks with my heart, hoping they'd get cashed in love. And most of all, it gave me clarity. They thought I gave to feel big. Well, maybe I was finally ready to show them what big really looked like. And this time, I wasn't going to apologize for it. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam a door, didn't even send a snarky text like a teenager with a grudge and too much time on his hands. No, I sat still. I breathed. I let that comment from Tammy echo in the back of my skull like a cheap firework in an empty alley, and I didn't do a damn thing right away. I let it simmer, not because I was afraid to react, but because I wanted the response to feel exactly like the silence they'd always given me: cold, deliberate, and unforgettable. There's a certain power in not reacting the way people expect you to. I knew what they would have expected if I'd stormed back into that kitchen and told Tammy exactly what I thought of her smug little voice. They would have laughed behind their wine glasses, played the victim card, told each other over group texts that I'd finally cracked. That I was too sensitive, or my money had gone to my head. I wasn't giving them that. I wasn't giving them anything they could twist into another excuse to call me dramatic or self-centered or bitter. No, I decided to give them something they couldn't talk their way around, something beautiful and biting at the same time, the way frost clings to glass in a sunbeam. I was going to give the kind of gift that made them question everything they thought they knew about me. And the best part? I wasn't going to send them a damn thing. Not the adults, at least. Not the ones who saw generosity as performance and kindness as pity. They would get nothing but the sound of their own teeth grinding when the kids lost their minds over what was coming. I started planning the next morning. I sat at the long oak table in my dining room, looking out the massive windows that faced my backyard, where the pool sparkled like a sapphire and the garden was kept alive by a full-time landscaper. The quiet in that house was rich and clean, the kind of quiet you buy after years of living above noisy neighbors and below people who argue with the television. And in that stillness, I started making a list. Not a petty list. Not a hit list. A gift list, but not for them. This one was for the kids. Every niece, every nephew, every godchild and step-grandkid in the family. I listed their names, their ages, and anything I remembered they'd been into the last time I paid attention. One kid was obsessed with space. Another had a thing for puzzles. One little girl, Tammy's middle daughter, was quiet like I used to be, liked painting rocks and lining them up in rows. I remembered that. I remembered all of it, even when they acted like I was invisible. I wasn't going to get them the cheap stuff. I wasn't sending over plastic garbage from big box stores or some sad stocking stuffer they'd forget by January 2nd. No, this was going to be big. The kind of big that echoed. Theme park tickets, hotel packages, tablets preloaded with art apps, subscriptions to science kits that arrived monthly like little packages from the universe itself. And every single box, every envelope, every carefully wrapped treasure was going to come with one line, with love, from Uncle Mike. From the mansion. No return address. No explanation. No warning. Just joy for the kids and confusion for the adults. The kind of confusion that burns like envy wrapped in gift paper. I spent a week coordinating everything. Hired a delivery service that handled luxury shipments, told them I needed the drop-off to happen on Christmas morning, no earlier, no later. Told them I wanted the boxes stacked neatly on each porch like offerings from some generous ghost with a perfect memory and a bottomless wallet. They didn't need to know why. No one did. I wasn't doing this to be a hero. I wasn't doing it to one-up anyone like Tammy had always accused me of trying to do. I was doing it because I'd had enough. Enough of being misread. Enough of giving and being told I gave for the wrong reasons. So this time, I wouldn't be giving for them at all. I'd be giving in spite of them. That week leading up to Christmas, I barely slept. Not because I was nervous, but because I hadn't felt this focused in years. It was like my brain had finally stopped looping old arguments and started composing something sharp and poetic. I wasn't planning revenge. I was curating an exhibit of everything they'd overlooked. I was taking all the time they'd spent dismissing me and turning it into a symphony of silence that would play in their heads long after the wrapping paper was gone. The night before Christmas Eve, I walked through my house, glass of bourbon in hand, checking every tracking number, every scheduled time slot, every signature confirmation. The house was quiet, but there was a hum inside me, something alive and bright. I didn't feel smug. I felt certain. This was the only kind of confrontation they would understand, the kind that didn't come with shouting or demands, just presence. Unignorable presence. And if you're wondering whether I considered the kids being caught in the crossfire, let me stop you right there. They weren't in the crossfire. They were the reason this wasn't war. They were the ones who deserved to know that family could show up big, could remember what mattered, could give without expectation. Even if their parents never figured out why. And no, I didn't include cards explaining my choices. I didn't attach messages begging to be understood. I didn't leave room for misinterpretation because I didn't care how the adults interpreted it. This wasn't about starting a conversation. This was the period at the end of a sentence I'd been writing since childhood. Let them whisper. Let them stew. Let them wonder how I pulled it off, why I did it, whether I was trying to embarrass them or just show off. Let them argue over whether it was generosity or vengeance or some mix of both. Let them realize, too late, that they'd mistaken quiet for weakness. Because when those kids opened their doors on Christmas morning and found those gifts from the uncle they'd barely known, the one who sat in the back, who never asked for much, who never got invited to the main table, I knew what would happen. They'd remember me. And so would their parents. Forever. Christmas morning started the way it always did in that neighborhood, quiet and cold, with frost biting at the edges of the windows and a faint smell of burnt coffee drifting out of someone's open kitchen door. Kids were already stirring in their pajamas, rubbing sleep from their eyes while parents staggered around in mismatched slippers and sweaters that hadn't seen daylight since last December. Tammy's house looked no different from the others on the block, modest, tidy, with one string of blinking lights sagging off the gutter and a faded inflatable Santa half deflated on the front lawn, like head had one too many eggnogs. Inside, the mood was typical. The kids were bouncing off the walls with anticipation, trying to guess which presents under the tree had their names on them. Tammy was already 3/4 annoyed, half awake, snapping at her youngest for shaking the boxes too hard, while her husband, Dale, poked around the fridge in search of last night's leftover ham. If you looked through the window, it would have seemed like any other suburban Christmas, ordinary, safe, controlled. Until the sound of tires on gravel interrupted the calm. Not just one car, not a delivery truck, not even the mailman doing some last-minute rounds. It was a fleet, 3 shiny black SUVs, tinted windows, spotless paint jobs, tires crunching slowly down the curved gravel driveway like a funeral procession wearing designer suits. Dale was the first to peek through the blinds, eyebrows lifted in surprise, muttering something like, "What the hell is that?" and Tammy followed, annoyed, towel in hand, thinking maybe it was the wrong address or some Amazon mistake. But it wasn't. The doors opened in perfect unison, like something out of a movie, and out stepped 4 uniformed men. No nonsense, black gloves, coordinated movement. Not cops. Not government. Private. The kind of clean, quiet professionalism you pay extra for. And then came the boxes. Not just big boxes, huge ones, carefully wrapped in deep navy paper with embossed silver ribbons that shimmered when the sun finally cut through the overcast sky. One after another, they were unloaded from the SUVs like artifacts or rare instruments, each placed delicately on the front porch while Tammy and Dale stood frozen behind the screen door, watching like it wasn't real. Each gift had a tag. Not handwritten, but custom printed. Crisp font. Elegant. No cute little messages. No Bible quotes or holiday wishes. Just a single line that said everything it needed to, for the kids, with love from Uncle Mike. From the mansion. The first box was an iPad. The second? Season passes to the state's biggest theme park, plus hotel accommodations for the whole family. Then came a Lego set worth more than most people's monthly rent, over 6,000 pieces, imported, exclusive, still warm from the manufacturer's warehouse. There were VR headsets, art kits, brand new bikes with the tires still smelling like factory rubber, and a glossy envelope with enough in Disney gift cards to make any kid lose their damn mind. Tammy's kids erupted like fireworks, screaming, laughing, hugging each other, jumping in place as the gifts kept coming like Santa Claus had ditched the sleigh for a luxury convoy and traded the red suit for an Armani trench coat. They didn't ask questions. Kids never do when magic walks up the driveway. But Tammy didn't move. She stood there, towel clutched tight in her fist, the color draining from her face faster than the snow melting off the warm hoods of those black SUVs. Dale looked at her once, then again, trying to figure out what expression was supposed to be on his face. Amazement? Gratitude? Confusion? He settled for silence, watching as one of the delivery men nodded politely and handed over a final envelope, one she refused to touch. She didn't need to open it. She knew who sent all this. Everyone on the damn street probably knew by now. You don't get a motorcade of black SUVs delivering luxury gifts on Christmas morning without raising a few eyebrows. Neighbors were already peeking from their windows, some stepping out onto porches in their robes, whispering to each other as if the president had just made a surprise visit to their cul-de-sac. Tammy couldn't speak. Her mind was working overtime, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to reshape the narrative before it spread. Because now the truth was out there, raw and undeniable. Mike wasn't just the quiet cousin with a chip on his shoulder. He wasn't some poor soul trying to buy love with Amazon packages. He was successful, powerful, and worse, thoughtful in a way that made her cruelty look cheap and small. She had spent years talking circles around him, brushing off his generosity, calling it performative or pitiful. And now here he was, not with a speech or a tantrum or even an invitation to argue, but with action. with gifts that would stick in her kids' memories like a golden fingerprint. He didn't need her validation anymore. He had gone bigger than her, louder without saying a word, and he had done it with ice in his veins and fire in his gut. The kids tore into the packages like lions at a feast, screaming about how Uncle Mike was the coolest, how they wanted to visit his house someday, how they didn't even care about the other presents under the tree. Tammy tried to force a smile, but it came out brittle, like something cracked and close to shattering. Dale just looked down at his coffee and muttered, "Well, guess we owe him a thank you call." She didn't answer. She was still watching the SUVs pull away, slow and steady, disappearing back down the street like shadows dissolving at dawn. No one said anything for a long time after that. The joy in the house didn't belong to her anymore. It was hijacked by a man she thought she could talk down into silence. And now he'd spoken louder than she ever could. She walked to the kitchen and sat down at the table, surrounded by half-eaten cinnamon rolls and wrapping paper chaos. Her youngest daughter ran past, hugging a new stuffed animal tight to her chest, shouting, "Uncle Mike is the best. We should invite him next year." Tammy flinched like someone had slapped her. And for the first time in her life, she had no idea what to say. You know, that kind of silence that doesn't come easy, the kind that fills a room without warning, not peaceful or soft, but thick and loaded, like someone forgot to finish a sentence and everyone else is too afraid to ask what comes next. That's what it felt like in the days after Christmas, when the gifts had been opened, the photos had been shared, and the realization of what happened started to land in the adult corners of the family like slow-moving ash from a quiet fire. No one said much, not directly, not right away, not in a way that you could point to and say, "There it is, that's the moment they understood." But the silence was there. Deafening. Precise. The group chat, the one Janice had renamed the Fam Bam years ago with way too many heart emojis, went eerily quiet. Normally, you couldn't shut them up for 2 seconds between the baby photos, vacation pics, passive-aggressive recipe swaps, and someone inevitably forwarding a chain prayer from a Facebook aunt. But after the gifts landed, that chat turned into a graveyard of blue bubbles and unread reactions. A couple of my cousins sent polite little texts, stuff like, "Thanks for the Disney cards, Mike, that was super generous," or "The kids loved everything. Hope you had a good one too." But you could feel it between the lines, the hesitation, the unease, the tiptoeing. They didn't know what to say, or maybe they were afraid of saying too much and showing just how small it made them feel. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to be cold, but because I didn't see the point. The message had already been delivered, and I hadn't needed a single spoken word to get it across. I wasn't interested in polite lies or forced gratitude. I didn't want them to spin it into something digestible, something they could chalk up to me being eccentric or overly generous, or just going through something. I wanted them to sit in it, to stew in the echo of their own assumptions about me, the ones they'd held for decades, and now had to look at through the lens of what I had done, deliberate, undeniable, unforgettable. I'd like to tell you I moved on right away, that I put it all behind me and walked into the new year feeling free and unbothered. And in some ways, yeah, I did. I got back to work, buried myself in contracts and emails, called my accountant about taxes, had lunch with a few guys from the board who didn't know or care about my family drama. I watched the snow melt from my driveway in early January and thought, that's it. That chapter's over. Let it rot. But then, like clockwork, on a night when the whiskey burned just right and the house felt too damn quiet for comfort, my mind circled back to that moment, Tammy's voice, clear as a bell in my memory, laughing like I was some joke that couldn't hear itself being told. "He buys gifts to feel better than us." That sentence had lived in me like a splinter, tiny but deep, working its way under the skin for years, maybe even before she ever said it out loud. It was the voice I imagined behind every eye roll, every awkward silence, every backhanded compliment I ever got from her and the others. And now, even after my response had landed exactly the way I wanted, I still couldn't quite shake the question clawing at the back of my throat. Was she jealous? Was she angry? Was she hurt? Or was she just playing her part in a family that never made room for the one who didn't fit the mold? Maybe, deep down, Tammy had always wanted to be close to me, but didn't know how. Maybe her way of dealing with someone else's success was to reduce it to something small enough to hold between her fingers and scoff at, like she did with everything that made her uncomfortable. Or maybe she just didn't care. Maybe she said what she said because it made her feel powerful, even for a second, and that second mattered more to her than any truth ever could. I thought about calling her once, not to apologize or fight, but just to ask her flat out, "Why did you say that? What did you mean by it? Did you think I wouldn't hear, or did you want me to?" But I didn't call, and I knew I never would, because that moment had already played out, and dragging it into the light now wouldn't make it cleaner. It would only dilute it. Some things hit hardest when they're left to rot quietly in the shadows where they came from. A part of me felt cold, I won't lie about that. I felt this new kind of coldness in my chest, not like hatred or rage, but like indifference with a steel edge. The kind of cold that says, "I see you now, and I don't need to understand you anymore." And yeah, another part of me felt vindicated, like I'd finally reclaimed something that had been taken from me a long time ago. Not pride, not status, just the ability to choose how I showed up in their lives, and when, and whether I wanted to show up at all. Because for the first time in forever, I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I wasn't hoping for a seat at the table or a warm hug from someone who used to forget my name in family prayers. I had made myself unforgettable in a way they couldn't ignore. And the silence that followed? That was the sound of their stories about me shattering, one polite thank you at a time. And still, in the quiet that came after all of it, I found myself wondering, not with longing, but with something more like curiosity, how long it would take before one of them broke the silence with something real. Not a thank you. Not a shallow compliment. Something real. An apology. An admission. A memory. Anything that didn't feel like performance. But nothing came. And maybe that's all the answer I'll ever get. It had been almost 2 months since the gifts were delivered, since the black SUVs rolled across driveways and left behind silence louder than any argument I could have ever thrown into the middle of a family dinner. The holidays were long over, the decorations back in their plastic bins, the sugar highs worn off, the social media posts buried under selfies and sunsets and other things that didn't matter. But for me, the quiet hadn't gone anywhere. It was still sitting in my house like a polite guest who refused to leave, following me from room to room with patient, unforgiving eyes. I kept trying to move past it, to put it down like a suitcase I didn't need to carry anymore, but there was something unfinished, and I knew exactly what it was. So one night, after too many hours staring at emails I didn't care about and sipping whiskey I wasn't enjoying, I sat down at my desk with nothing but a yellow legal pad and the one thing I had never actually tried to do: tell Tammy everything. Not scream. Not humiliate. Not perform. Just write it all down like she might read it, even if I knew damn well she never would. I didn't type it, because typing makes things feel too official, too clean. I needed it to be messy, to feel like it was pouring out of me whether I liked it or not. I started the letter 3 different times before I found a rhythm. At first, it was polite, almost formal, like I was sending a business memo to someone I barely knew. But then something broke open in me, and the words came harder, heavier, sharper, more honest than I'd ever said them out loud. Tammy, I've played the scene in my head so many damn times, I almost feel like you've already read it. But I know you haven't. I know you probably never will. And maybe that's for the best. Let me start with something simple. No, I didn't send those gifts to make you look bad. I didn't do it to flex or to buy love or to make your kids like me more than they like you. I did it because I wanted them to feel something I never got to feel growing up. Wanted. Seen. Celebrated. You know what it felt like being the kid who got invited last, who got the smallest slice of cake, the coldest plate of food, the gift that was clearly meant for someone else and just reassigned to me at the last minute. You probably don't. You were always the favorite, every room bent toward you like sunlight. You didn't have to try. I was the one who had to fight for eye contact, for a thank you, for someone to remember I was in the damn room. You and the others, you talked about me like I was trying too hard. Like I was desperate for approval. And maybe I was, back then. But it never came. So I worked. I built. I got stronger. And when I finally had something to give, something real, something thoughtful, I gave it. Not because I wanted claps, but because giving was the only way I knew how to be part of something bigger than myself. And then I heard you say it. He buys gifts to feel better than us. That line, Tammy, it didn't break my heart. It didn't even make me mad. It made me tired. Tired in the bones. Tired in the soul. Because that's when I realized it didn't matter what I gave, how carefully I picked it, how quietly I showed up. You'd already decided who I was. You'd decided it years ago. Maybe since we were kids. So no, the gifts weren't revenge. Not really. They were a decision. A choice. A way to say, if you're going to misunderstand me, then let me give you something impossible to ignore. I wanted the kids to feel wonder. I wanted them to wake up and think, holy hell, someone remembered me. Because that's what I never got. That's what I still think about every Christmas morning, every Easter Sunday, every birthday I spent wondering if anyone even knew how old I was turning. Debbie did. But she's gone. You don't know this, but I still keep one of her old notes. She wrote, "You don't need them to clap for you. You'll be someone without their applause." I didn't understand it when I first read it. But now? Now I think I do. I didn't need the applause. I needed the silence to end. But the silence came anyway. After the SUVs, after the gifts, after the kids' laughter, what did I get from you? Nothing. Not a thank you. Not a phone call. Just that same old family habit, pretend it never happened. Shove it down. Act like I'm the weird one for making things awkward. So this is me saying what I've never said. I was never trying to be better than you. I just wanted to stop feeling smaller than you. And I did. For once, I finally did. And if you ever decide to understand me, really understand me, I hope you read this and know you never had to clap. You just had to care. I stopped writing there, not because I ran out of things to say, but because I finally realized I'd said enough. The pen slipped from my fingers, and I stared at the page like it might vanish if I looked too hard. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd fold it, seal it, send it off in the mail with no return address. But that would have made it about her again. And this was about me. So I walked out to the fire pit in my backyard, the one I'd had installed, but barely used. I lit the letter with a long match, watched the flames curl around the paper, eating the ink, swallowing the weight. The fire danced and spit as the words turned to ash, and I felt something shift in my chest, not release, exactly, but a loosening. A breath I hadn't known I was holding finally let itself go. Some things aren't meant to be said. Some things are meant to be felt, burned, buried, and remembered only by the person strong enough to carry them. And I was done carrying this one. The snow had been falling since just before dawn, soft and heavy, the kind of snow that turns the world quiet before anyone's even awake to notice. The kind that blankets every sound, every crack in the driveway, every branch in the trees, turning even the ugliest things beautiful for a little while. From where I sat, high-backed leather chair by the tall windows of the second floor, I could see the long curve of my driveway disappearing under a white hush, like time itself had finally decided to slow the hell down and let me breathe. No music, no movement. Just the sound of the fireplace crackling behind me and the ticking of the old grandfather clock I never bothered to reset after the last daylight saving change. The mansion, yeah, let's stop pretending I don't call it that, stood silent around me, all 5,000 square feet of polished stone and polished floors, with vaulted ceilings and rooms I barely walked into unless I was showing someone around, which I hadn't done in months. It was the kind of house you buy when you're trying to prove something to yourself more than anyone else, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't walk through it sometimes like I still didn't quite believe it was mine. But today, it didn't feel impressive. It felt big. And empty. The kind of empty that makes your breath sound too loud in your own chest. I hadn't decorated for Christmas that year. Not a single string of lights, not one wreath or red ribbon. I didn't even dig out the dusty box of ornaments from the basement. There'd been no tree, no eggnog, no music crackling through wireless speakers while I pretended to enjoy a holiday movie I didn't really care about. No visitors. No invitations. Not even a pity call from Aunt Janice or a guilt-laced voicemail from one of the cousins asking if I was doing okay after the stunt I pulled. Just me, the snow, and the long stretch of quiet that had settled in like it planned to stay for the season. And then, just as I was sipping the last inch of cold coffee from a chipped mug I couldn't bring myself to replace, my phone buzzed. One single notification. No name, no words. Just a photo. I stared at it for a second before tapping the screen. It was Troy, Tammy's boy, standing in his messy little bedroom, half lit by fairy lights strung across his bunk bed, grinning like someone had just told him the world was his. He was holding the telescope I'd sent him. The good one. The kind that could spot Saturn's rings if you knew where to look. His eyes were wide, full of something I hadn't seen in years, wonder. And behind him, I could make out posters of constellations tacked up on the wall and an open box of star charts spilling across the bed. No caption. Just that one picture. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I should have, long enough for the screen to dim and the phone to lock itself again. I didn't open it twice. I didn't send a reply. I just sat there, the photo burned into my brain in a way no thank you card ever could have managed. There was a smile on my face before I even realized it, but the tear that ran down my cheek came slower, like it had waited a long time for permission to fall. I wiped it away with the back of my hand, not ashamed, not proud, just real. That moment, that single, unspoken connection, felt more honest than anything I'd had with the rest of the family in years. It wasn't validation. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something else. Something better. It was a kid saying, I saw what you did, and it mattered. And that was enough. The house didn't feel quite so cold after that, but it didn't exactly warm up either. The fire still popped in the hearth, but the shadows on the walls didn't dance. They lingered, thick and still, like they knew I wasn't done yet. Because here's the thing about doing something bold, something unforgettable, you don't get to control what happens after. You don't get to dictate how people feel or what stories they tell themselves to make sense of it all. I gave those kids joy, but I also gave the adults something they couldn't easily forgive, a mirror. And mirrors, when they show you what you don't want to see, tend to get smashed or ignored. I don't know what they said about me after that. I don't know if Tammy ever admitted to anyone that I heard her. Maybe she never told Dale. Maybe she rewrote the whole thing in her mind, turned it into another Mike moment, something she could laugh off or resent in private. That's her business now, not mine. People will ask, did you do it to feel better? And the honest answer is, I don't really know. Maybe I did. Maybe I wanted to feel seen, to stop being a footnote in their stories and become a headline for once, even if just for a day. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was beautiful. Maybe it was a little of both. But the truth is, I did it because I could. Because I had the means, the memory, and the kind of pain that simmers into purpose if you leave it on the stove long enough. And maybe, just maybe, it was all one big *** cut up way to say something I never had the courage to say out loud. I never stopped wanting to be part of the family. That was the truth, no matter how hard I tried to bury it. No matter how many rooms I filled with furniture or how many zeros I stacked in my bank account. I just wanted to belong. Wanted to be remembered for something more than my absence or my wallet. And for a while, I thought maybe that ship had finally come in, only to realize it was never built for me in the first place. But now? Now I don't need to be. Because for once, I said my piece loudly, quietly, and without permission. And even if no one else got it, even if the grown-ups stayed silent and the group chat stayed dead, I knew one thing with a kind of clarity that didn't ask for applause. I was never invisible. Not anymore. Not ever again. Let them decide how to remember it. Let them argue about whether I went too far or not far enough. Let the mansion echo. I'll be here, listening, watching, unmoved, unapologetic, and finally free.